Dubin. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indie Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indie Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome to the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indie Sports Ticket. Hopefully, you've had a nice little start to your week. I woke up today, I thought it was Wednesday, and I was very wrong about that because today is Tuesday. And tomorrow night's Pacers Knicks begins. Tonight we got Thunder and Timberwolves Western Conference Finals. You know, where the winner's probably going to get to play against the Indiana Pacers because the Pacers are very simply better than the New York Knicks. We're going to have Jared Dubin on the show later, avid Knicks fan, and we're going to talk about the series. Last year, the Pacers got to the Eastern Conference Finals. They played the Boston Celtics. They got swept. And this year, they're back. And this year feels so incredibly different. Last year, it felt like the Pacers had absolutely no chance whatsoever to beat the Boston Celtics. And that was before Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. Like, going into that series, it was a lot of Boston in 5, Boston sweeps the Pacers, all those kinds of predictions were not uncommon. And even though the Pacers were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, we didn't even mention the idea of the Pacers playing in the NBA Finals. This year, however, it's entirely different. We're not only talking about the Pacers advancing, but we're talking about them like maybe even winning the NBA Finals for the first time in the franchise's history. And it's insane to me how much better this team has gotten from last year to this year. And a lot of times in the NBA, when teams make leaps, it's because they make some big trade or, they draft the perfect role player and they're better than people expect. And things like that are usually what push teams over the limit. Like, for example, this summer, everyone is going to be paying attention to the Houston Rockets, a team that lost in the first round this year. And if they make a trade for Kevin Durant or Giannis, all of a sudden, the Houston Rockets will be viewed as these legitimate NBA Finals contenders. The Pacers didn't build that way, and I think it's awesome. The NBA and the fans of the NBA do not talk enough about player development because it is so important. When you look at who I think are the two best teams left, the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers, they are both playing in the conference finals because of the way that they have developed players. For the Thunder, they have drafted and developed. For the Pacers, there's been a mix of trading for players and developing them, and also drafting players and developing them. Like, every player on this Indiana Pacers roster that played in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, they're better this year. They got better. Tyrese Halliburton is a significantly better defender this year than he was last year. Andrew Nembhard, who was a very good defender last year, he's gotten better. He's a better defender now. Pascal Siakam, a guy who's been in the league for a decade now. Yeah, that guy improved his three-point shooting. He's shooting a career high from 3 this season. Aaron Nesmith, a guy who shot over 40% from 3 last year. Yeah, he's shooting a career high from 3 this year. Obi Toppin is averaging a career high in points. Miles Turner is shooting a career high from 3. Benedict Mathurin is shooting a career high from the field. And he's turned into a pretty solid defender. Jarris Walker has had moments in these playoffs where he looks like a playable rotation playoff piece. That's why the Pacers are here. And, I talk a lot about the front office of the Indiana Pacers and how great Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan and the rest of that Pacers front office have done because they've drafted some of these guys and they've made excellent trades. But that's only half of the equation. You don't have to give credit to Rick Carlisle and the developmental part of the coaching staff because every player on the Indiana Pacers has gotten better. And you don't reach this point as a smaller market team that, isn't going to be able to make trades for Giannis or Kevin Durant or Karl Anthony Towns like the Knicks did. Like smaller marketed teams, like you're just not getting to do that as much. You're not. And so you have to have a coaching staff that excels at developing players. And the Pacers clearly have that. And what I love about this series, besides the fact that it's Pacers-Knicks and there's a very rich rivalry history here, I'm going to go back tonight because I think my wife's going to be gone for a bit. And I'm going to rewatch the 30 for 30, about Reggie Miller and Spike Lee, because that is really where all this has started. But in addition to that, you've got big market New York against small market Indianapolis. And the way that these two teams have been built has just been different. It's been so incredibly different. Big market teams, the Knicks, how are they built? They built their team through signing a big free agent in Jalen Brunson, through trading for Karl Anthony Towns, big-time trade, and making another big-time trade for Mikal Bridges. That is how they've developed. They also traded for OG Anunoby. This hasn't been a draft and develop New York Knicks franchise. This is let's make big-time splashes in the trade market, and let's go. And then you have the Pacers, who have, they're at this point because of the way that they have developed players. And I just think that is another layer of this. And I can't wait to watch this series. I think it's going to be nothing short of fantastic. And the way that these two teams have been built, I think very well represents how smaller marketed and big market teams build in the NBA. Big market teams build through trades. Small market teams build through the development of players and drafting. The Thunder have drafted and developed players at an elite level. Now they're the favorite to win the NBA Finals. The Minnesota Timberwolves, same thing. They have drafted and developed players. That's why they're at where they are. The Pacers have a chance to win it all because they have developed players. The Knicks are in the position that they're in because of the trades that they made. You have the Lakers, who became relevant again because they traded for Luka Doncic. And before that, they did a big-time free agent acquisition in LeBron James. And then the Houston Rockets, the fourth largest market in the NBA, they're going to be super relevant after they potentially make a big trade this summer. It is the way of the NBA. I think it's cool seeing how both ways of building a team have worked this season. Now, Pacers-Knicks, big-time preview. And, oh, man, a rematch from last year's NBA playoffs. The Pacers won the series in 7 games, but won Game 7 in Madison Square Garden. Pacers set a record for the highest field goal percentage in a playoff game in NBA history. I don't want to hear anything about the Pacers not being able to handle the bright lights of Madison Square Garden when they won a Game 7 there last year. Okay, that is what people should remember from that series, but it's not. What people remember from that series last year were all the injuries. Jalen Brunson, I saw some idiot tweet the other day about how Jalen Brunson got hurt in that series. Yeah, he got hurt in Game 7 after playing in games 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. He broke his hand in the third quarter when the score was 92-74. The game was over. Mitchell Robinson, who terrifies me, he got hurt during Game 1. That's not surprising. Mitchell Robinson's career has been riddled with injuries. Julius Randle didn't play in the series last year. He's now playing for the Timberwolves. That was a big deal, except Knicks fans kept telling me they were better without Julius Randle. I don't know. I would disagree with that, but hey, whatever. OG Anunoby missed some games with a hamstring strain last year. Another player who has a tendency to get hurt throughout his career. So let's be honest, that wasn't really surprising. The Pacers, they didn't have Benedict Mathurin last year, a very important piece, although not as important as OG Anunoby or Julius Randle were to the New York Knicks. Now, the other thing that I think is really important to remember about this series is that last year, just throw it away. It has no bearing on this series. Very slight bearing, at least. There are very few things applicable from last year's series between the Knicks and the Pacers to this year's series. The Knicks are actually healthy coming into this series. Okay, Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, Isaiah Hartenstein, all of them are gone. None of those guys play for the Knicks, even though all three of those guys are still playing. They're just playing out west. Okay, the Knicks brought in Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges for the Pacers. Benedict Matherin's back. They've gotten better since last year. Thomas Bryant's the backup center now. Isaiah Jackson's hurt. He's not playing. The other thing, though, the most important thing is both of these teams are better, especially the Pacers. After the All-Star break last year, the Pacers were 18th in defensive rating in the NBA, and people talked about how much better the Pacers got defensively after the All-Star break. Meanwhile, in the final 57 games of this season, the Pacers have had the 6th best defensive rating in the NBA. This is a much better defensive team than what the Knicks played last year. Andrew Nembhard is now one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. Aaron Nesmith is still a great defender. TJ McConnell off the bench can still guard. Miles Turner is a reliable rim protector. Tyrese Halliburton has been much better in these playoffs on the defensive end of the floor. Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker have stretches where they look like very good defenders off the bench. In the playoffs, the Pacers' defensive rating this year is 111.9. That is 8th in the playoffs this year. Last year was 118.8. Once again, they are a much better defensive team this year than they were last year. And last year, they didn't play a team as good offensively as the Cleveland Cavaliers have been in the playoffs this season. Obviously, the Pacers' offense is still elite. Of all the teams remaining, they have the highest offensive rating of all the teams left in the conference finals. The Pacers are a much more complete team this year than they were last year. And that is such an important thing to remember coming into this series. And they're going to give the Knicks all they can handle. I can't wait to see how this series unfolds. And I'll be interested to see how the Pacers line up defensively because of how last year went. They're probably going to start with Andrew Nembhard on Jalen Brunson. The issue is Jalen Brunson kind of had his way with Andrew Nembhard last year. The kind of guys that Jalen Brunson has success against are smaller guys, even though Andrew Nembhard's not small, but guys that just aren't quite as strong. And while Aaron Nesmith is obviously very, very strong, Aaron Nesmith, a little stronger. He had a lot more success defending Jalen Brunson than Andrew Nembhard did last year. TJ McConnell had more success defending Jalen Brunson than Andrew Nembhard did last year. So I think that they're going to start with Nembhard on Jalen Brunson because they want to put Aaron Nesmith on Mikal Bridges. I also think that they're going to start with Miles Turner on Karl Anthony Towns. We'll see if they do any sort of cross-matching. Very intrigued to see how two of the best pick-and-pop centers in the league, Karl Anthony Towns and Miles Turner, do having to defend one another. I am so intrigued to see how these two teams line up on the defensive side of the basketball. I'll be interested, to kind of see how all of that works. And for the most part, the Pacers are the same team from last year. As I said, Matt Matherin's going to be available. Thomas Bryant is now the backup center. So for the Knicks, they're looking at the Pacers. It's pretty similar. But obviously, the Knicks are different. But they're also better on both sides of the ball. When you add Mikal Bridges to a team last year that defended pretty well, you're going to be even better defensively. Their defensive rating is up from 120.6 in the playoffs last year. The Pacers really did a number on them to 110.6 in the playoffs this year. Offensively, with the additions of Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns, their offense is technically worse by the numbers. Last year in the playoffs, they had an offensive rating of 118.1. This year, it's 110.7. To be fair, they haven't played a defense as bad as the Pacers was last year. During this playoff run. And while the numbers are worse, I would argue that the Knicks are better offensively this year just because they have more options to go to. Like last year, it was really just Jalen Brunson running the offense. He handled the ball a ton because the Knicks didn't really have any other shot creators. But this year they do. Mikal Bridges, more than capable of, being the engine of the offense for 4 minutes. Karl Anthony Towns is a guy who, you can throw the ball into, and he can go and he can get you a bucket, and he can be the engine of the offense for a couple of minutes. So, like, the Knicks have more options offensively, which is always a plus. And for them, the matchups are going to be interesting, especially with how they want to defend the Pacers. Like, Mitchell Robinson gives them real rim protection, and they need it because I like Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns is a good player, but he can't defend the rim. I think we're going to see a lot of Mitchell Robinson in this series for two reasons. One, he protects the rim at a very high level. And two, he's a great pick and roll defender. And you know that the Pacers want to run that Tyrese Halliburton, Miles Turner, or Andrew Nembhard, Miles Turner pick and pop / pick and roll. And Karl Anthony Towns is not very well suited to try to defend that. And maybe they try to play Towns and Robinson together. That spells trouble for the Knicks because I don't know where you're going to hide both Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. It's very hard to hide anyone defensively against this Indiana Pacers team because of how they move the ball and how everyone is constantly involved. So how they try to balance the minutes for Karl Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson is something that I'm going to be very intrigued to see how they do it. They'll put OG Anunoby on Pascal Siakam again like they did last year. I'm guessing they'll put Mikal Bridges on Tyrese Halliburton, but with the way that the Pacers run their offense, I don't think it's really going to matter. They're going to move the ball. The shots are going to be spread out. I'm very intrigued to see where the Knicks try to hide Jalen Brunson because it's going to be much tougher for them to hide Brunson than it's going to be for the Pacers to hide Tyrese Halliburton. Obviously, the Pacers are going to put Halliburton on Josh Hart. That's where they're probably going to put him. I guess they could put him on OG Anunoby or Mikal Bridges. They're not going to put him on Jalen Brunson because I do think that there's a world where the Pacers try to put Miles Turner on Josh Hart so that, Miles Turner can just kind of hang out around the rim a little bit more. We'll kind of see how that works. Like I said, very intrigued to see if there's any cross-matching that happens in this series. Okay, but I do know that the Knicks won't be able to hide Brunson and Towns on defense, and the Pacers will have options to try to hide Tyrese Halliburton. In terms of experience, because this is something that we talk about a lot during any sort of playoffs, whether that be the NBA, NFL, or Major League Baseball, there's no advantage here in terms of experience. Like the Knicks have multiple guys that have played in the conference finals before. Jalen Brunson played in the Western Conference Finals. I think that was 4 years ago. Mikal Bridges played in the NBA Finals not that long ago. OG Anunoby won a title in Toronto. Like, this is basically the same Pacers team from last year. They all played in the conference finals. Okay, the winner of this series, though, is going to be the team that dictates pace the best. The Pacers were 7th in the NBA in pace during the regular season. They've played the 3rd fastest pace in these playoffs. The Knicks were 26th in pace during the regular season. They're 8th in pace during the playoffs. And you hear that and you're probably like, oh, the Knicks have they're playing a little faster. No, their pace is actually slower in the playoffs than what it was during the regular season. Meanwhile, the Pacers is up in the playoffs from what it was during the regular season. Now, the Knicks are very well conditioned, but if they're running up and down the floor for the whole game like the Pacers want to, then they're going to get worn down over the course of the game and over the course of the series, since they're playing every other day the whole way. There is not a player for the Pacers averaging over 35 minutes per game in the playoffs. Meanwhile, every starter for the Knicks is averaging over 35 minutes a game. OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are both playing over 40 minutes a game. That is what they're averaging. And I just think 40 minutes of having to run it up and down, like that's tough, even for the best conditioned players. Watching the Knicks play the Pistons, and the Pistons play kind of fast, not as fast as the Pacers, but they play kind of fast. If you watched that series, a lot, not every, but a lot of the shots that the Knicks took late in games, they were leaving them on the front of the rim. Tired legs. That matters. Also, the Pacers are incredibly physical. So physicality and a high pace, like that wears on teams. So if the Pacers control the pace, then I feel great about them because the bench is deep and they're going to play 10 or 11 guys. When you look at the Knicks, they might play 8, maybe. They might play campaign. But mainly, it's going to be the 5 starters, Deuce McBride, and Mitchell Robinson. 7 dudes. That's all they have. Meanwhile, the Pacers, 10 or 11 deep. I think a faster pace series favors the Pacers tremendously to a point where if the series is consistently fast, I don't think the Knicks have any sort of chance to win the series. The Knicks' only chance to beat the Pacers is to slow it down. Make the Pacers play half court. Get physical. Get them out of the flow of their offense. If I'm the Knicks, my goal every time down I'm playing defense is to get for Tyrese Halliburton or Pascal Siakam to isolate. That's what you want if you're the Knicks. What you don't want is for the ball to be hopping around and you're scrambling around trying to keep up with the basketball. Whoever dictates the pace in this series is going to win the series. And I think that the Pacers dictate pace better than any other team in the NBA. Give me the Pacers in 6. I think they win game 1 tomorrow night. I'm going to do a full game 1 breakdown thing tomorrow. But I think they go in and they steal game 1 tomorrow night. I hope everyone stays healthy for the Pacers. I hope everyone stays healthy for the Knicks. Because if they do, I think this is going to be a fantastic series. And the Pacers don't need for the Knicks to be banged up like they were last year to have a chance to win this series. I think they are just very simply the better basketball team of the two. When we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, I'm going to get into Pacer players who needs to be better or who needs to continue to play well, because it seems like everyone for the Pacers is playing really well. Tyrese Halliburton, he's got to continue to be great because that's what he has been. The engine of this Pacers offense has to continue to be awesome. I'm going to talk about how he can do that and obviously why he needs to do that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
Uh-oh. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to tune in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy's Sports Ticket, if you head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith. If you follow me and watch the show there, you can definitely do that. Or maybe you're listening via that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. You can also listen to the Dan Dockett Show there from noon to 3. And if you want more from me, my take is on YouTube. You can also go and check that out. Now, the Indiana Pacers are playing in the Eastern Conference Finals against the New York Knicks. Hicks versus Knicks. Part, I have no idea, but part a lot. And I'm so excited for this series. It just adds to this outstanding rivalry. And this Pacers team has just been rolling throughout these playoffs. They've got, 6 guys averaging 14 points or more in these playoffs. If this continues, they'll be the first team since 1987 to have, 6 players or more average 14 points per game or more. It is a team. No one is averaging over 20 points in these playoffs. Pascal Siakam is the leading scorer for the Indiana Pacers, in the playoffs so far at just under 19 points per game. It is a team-driven thing, and it's awesome. It is so much fun to watch this team play. And they're shooting the ball so incredibly well. And this is just something that I've noticed. I don't have any numbers behind this. This is a pure eye test thing. Maybe the numbers say something different. Shooting feels down in the NBA playoffs. Like in a league where, 3-point shooting is such an important thing. And, when you watch some teams play, not the teams that are left, but when you watch certain teams play, it just feels like 3-point shooting is really all that matters, right? And so you sit back and you watch these games, and it just feels like some of these teams are shooting the ball so poorly. Like the Thunder are only shooting 32% from 3 during the playoffs. And that's a team that can really shoot the basketball. The, Cavaliers, a team that, shot a ton of threes during the regular season, only shot 36% from 3 during the playoffs. That's down from what they shot in the regular season. The Boston Celtics, 36%. The Knicks, just under 36%. Meanwhile, you have the Pacers shooting 41% from 3 so far in these playoffs. That is significantly better than any of the other teams that are left. Like I said, the Knicks are the second closest, and they're shooting at 35.8%. Let's just call it 36. That's 5% worse. Like that's a pretty big gap. And then the Timberwolves are at 35%. And then, as I said earlier, the Thunder are at 32. Why is that happening? Why is 3-point shooting down in the playoffs compared to the regular season? I think that the answer is the physicality and the fact that these minutes mean just a little bit more in the playoffs. Like I feel like playing a minute in the playoffs is the equivalent to playing a minute and a half during the regular season, given the pace and the physicality of these games. And that's why I think the Pacers' depth has been so important in these playoffs. Like they're just fresher than every other team that's been playing. And because of that, Aaron Nesmith has the legs in the fourth quarter to actually knock down open threes as he's shooting, 48% from 3 during these playoffs on like 5.5 attempts per game. Having fresh legs is what has allowed Andrew Nembhard to shoot 50% from 3 so far in these playoffs. Miles Turner shooting 45% from three in these playoffs. You know why? Because his legs are fresh going into the fourth quarter and late in games. And I think it's such a large part of why they've pulled off not one, but two of these crazy comebacks, one against Cleveland and then one against Milwaukee. Like, they're actually fresh and they're not leaving shots on the front of the rim like the Cavaliers did in that game that they choked, like the Milwaukee Bucks did in the game 5 that they choked. Their depth has been so incredibly important. Like, Tyrese Halliburton is their best player and he's only playing 34 minutes a game. That is so uncommon in this modern era of playoff basketball where your best player doesn't play 34 minutes in the playoffs. He's playing 38, 39, 40. But not Halliburton. He's going to play 34, and he's going to be awesome in those 34 minutes. And it has just been so much fun to watch this Pacers team. And that is something that I'm going to be looking at tomorrow night and throughout this series. Do the Knicks leave a bunch of threes on the front of the rim? Because that is usually the indication that the opposing team is tired. So hopefully the Pacers can continue to get great production from their bench because they're going to need it. The bench production is a large part of what makes the Indiana Pacers the Indiana Pacers. I mean, they've got 7 guys averaging double figures. They've got 9 guys averaging 9 points or more. It's crazy. Just the amount of depth that this Indiana Pacers team has, and that is going to be a major role in why they beat the New York Knicks in 6 games. Jared Dubin of LastNightInBasketball.com, he's set to join the show coming up here in about 25 minutes or so, and I'm sure he probably has the Knicks. He is a Knicks fan. We'll forgive him for that later. But I'm very excited to talk to him, and I'm excited to watch this Pacers team continue, especially since Tyrese Halliburton has been so good in these playoffs. He's been excellent in 9 of the Pacers' 10 playoff games so far. He was bad game 3 against the Cavaliers, only scored 4 points, seemed very disengaged. Outside of that, though, he's been outstanding, and he has to continue to be that for the Pacers to win this series. And when you listen to other outlets, maybe it's ESPN, maybe it's the other station, whoever, if they do anything on Tyrese Halliburton versus Jalen Brunson, just turn it off, because they're just telling on themselves and they're saying that they have no idea what they're talking about. Tyrese Halliburton doesn't have to be better than Jalen Brunson for the Pacers to win this series. Chances are he's not going to be better than Jalen Brunson because Brunson's going to play, 7 more minutes a game than Tyrese Halliburton does. If Tyrese Halliburton is just himself, then the Pacers are going to be fine. This is not a Halliburton versus Brunson thing. I think that's a really dumb narrative that people are probably going to get dragged down into. Not me. We're just going to walk over it, because while the Knicks are extremely reliant on Jalen Brunson to score and to set up other players, yes, the Pacers are reliant on Tyrese Halliburton to be the engine of the offense and to get them into their offense and to move the ball around, but they don't need him to go for 30 and 12 a night. Meanwhile, the Knicks absolutely do need for Jalen Brunson to get 30 and 7 or 30 and 6 every single night. So if Halliburton is just himself, he'll probably have a game at some point in the series where he goes bonkers, like he did against Cleveland in game 5, like he did against the Bucks in game 5. Then, that one game will be a lot of fun to watch. But aside from that, he just needs to be himself, go get 18 and 9, 18 and 10. And if he does that consistently, then I have all the faith in the world in the Indiana Pacers to win that series and move on to the NBA Finals, where they'll play one of either the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Oklahoma City Thunder. That series starts tonight. I can't wait. That series is going to be every bit as much fun as Pacers versus Knicks. I'll give you my thoughts on Timberwolves Thunder when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
best takes? Maybe. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. It's greatly appreciated, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith, or the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. You can also listen to the Dan Dockett Show there from noon to 3. And if you want more from me, as always, the My Take Is YouTube page. And I suck. I do. I got a text and in this group chat. One of my good buddies, his birthday was coming up, is coming up. I had no idea. Didn't have any sort of clue. And I hope he's not listening because I'm going to ruin something if he is. And I got a text from his girlfriend or fiance, excuse me. And, she's like, hey, we're going to do a surprise party May 31st. Come out if you can. I don't want to go out at all. I don't know. This is where I suck. I don't like celebrating my birthday. I don't understand celebrating other people's birthdays. I get it for like a kid, but I feel like once you turn a certain age, it's just another day, And I know I'm wrong whenever I say that, and I know that birthdays are the biggest deal in the world, and we got to celebrate everybody's birthday. Yeah, no, you actually don't. It's kind of incredible. You can actually opt not to celebrate someone's birthday. So I don't get it, but hey, it's fine. Let me know. Am I right on this? And if there is a certain age that you should just no longer celebrate someone's birthday, what is that age? Please tell me. Anyway, Thunder and Timberwolves, and the real reason why I don't want to go, last thing on this surprise birthday party thing, Pacers-Knicks play that night. Like, if we're going to have a surprise party, how about we don't have it the same night as Pacers-Knicks? I don't know. All right, done with that. Timberwolves, Thunder, that series starts tonight. The two best shooting guards in the NBA are playing against each other in the Western Conference Finals. You got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Anthony Edwards. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait to watch these two guys duel and go at it because Anthony Edwards, he thinks he's better than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's probably going to win the MVP this year. And I'll be honest, I kind of hate that this series starts tonight and not tomorrow night. Feels like the Thunder got the short end of the stick in that regard. Having had to play Game 7 a couple days ago, but hey, maybe don't go to 7 games if you want a little bit more rest and not rely on the NBA schedule to give you that rest. But the fact that this series starts for the Eastern Conference Finals doesn't feel right, but it is what it is. The Thunder should win this series. Their roster is better than Minnesota's. They're the best defensive team in the NBA. They've got waves and waves of players to throw at Anthony Edwards. Alex Caruso, Lou Dort, Cason Wallace, Aaron Wiggins, which means for the Timberwolves to have a chance to win this series, Julius Randle is going to have to continue to be great. He's playing some of the best basketball of his career right now. He's a large part of why the Timberwolves disposed of the Lakers in 5 games. He was great against the Warriors. To be fair, the Make-A-Wish Warriors, because they didn't have Steph Curry. Julius Randle can have these stretches where he just kind of looks like the bad version of Russell Westbrook, where he'll turn the ball over or he'll get tunnel vision and just throw up a bad shot when someone else is open. He hasn't done that so far throughout these playoffs, really towards the end of the regular season either. And that has to continue for the Thunder to have any sort of chance to win this series. And the issue is this is the best defensive team in the NBA, and they make you play faster than you want to. Like when you play against the Thunder, and why I'm really hoping the Thunder play the Pacers in the NBA Finals is because the Thunder, when you play against them, if you hold the ball, you're done. Like you have to catch the ball and go or catch the ball and make the proper pass or, whatever it is that you need to do. And for, the Timberwolves, I don't think that they're great at this. I think Julius Randle likes to catch the ball and then survey, figure out what he wants to do, and then go. Anthony Edwards kind of can fall into that lull. Jaden McDaniels, same thing. So I'm very intrigued to see how the Timberwolves deal with this very fast, very aggressive, very physical defense that the Thunder play with. And so if the Timberwolves are able to kind of play at their pace and play a little bit slower and the Thunder are unable to speed them up, then the Timberwolves are going to have a chance to win this series. I don't think that they're going to be able to do that. That's why I like the Thunder to win in 7. And the other thing that I think is going to be exposed in this series is Anthony Edwards can't be the only guy for the Timberwolves who consistently creates offense. The Nuggets lost that series to the Thunder in part because, there were just too many games where Nikola Jokic was the only guy consistently creating offense. Jamal Murray had bad games. Aaron Gordon, not really a creator. Michael Porter Jr., not really a creator. And I think that the Timberwolves have a very similar issue because, as I said, the Thunder have a million guys to kind of throw at Anthony Edwards, which means that you're not relying on Julius Randle to do a lot of the creating. And I don't think that the Timberwolves want that. So we'll kind of see how that goes. They're going to need guys like Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo and Mike Conley to create offense for short stretches because Anthony Edwards against this Thunder defense isn't going to be able to do it for the entirety of the game. And Julius Randle against this defense makes me nervous. Now, I do think that they're a little better suited than the Nuggets to take on this Thunder defense, but I still expect for the best defense in the NBA to win out. I think these two teams are incredibly well matched if Julius Randle continues to play the way that he has lately. If he reverts back to like New York Knicks, Julius Randle, and he's turning the ball over and he's getting tunnel vision, then Thunder in 5. But the question for me in this series is going to be the non-stars. Anthony Edwards and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are both going to be great, even though both teams have multiple options to kind of throw at them. I've talked about how, the Thunder have a million good defensive guards that they can throw at Edwards, but, the Timberwolves will be able to put Anthony Edwards or Jaden McDaniels or Nickeil Alexander-Walker on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like they've got some tough options for him as well, but I do expect for both of them to be great in this series. I expect for the Thunder to get good games from Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren nightly. But what about everyone else? Can Aaron Wiggins or Isaiah Joe hit a couple threes off the bench? Will Alex Caruso do that thing where he checks in and forces 3 turnovers in 2 minutes? Will Lou Dort make the Timberwolves pay for actually leaving him open? And the same thing goes for Minnesota. Does Jaden McDaniels continue to be good putting the ball on the deck? Does Mike Conley and Dante DiVincenzo, do they make open timely threes? And this is where experience matters. That's what people say, at least. And there's not really much in question here. The Timberwolves are significantly more experienced than the Thunder. The Timberwolves were in the conference finals last year. For a lot of these Thunder players, it's their first time in the conference finals. And experience tends to matter, but I do think that the Thunder got over a pretty big hump in beating the Nuggets in 7, by 32 on top of that. And the other thing is experience doesn't matter defensively. It impacts your offense, I think, more than anything else. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is as cool as they come. One of the, arguably the best bucket getter in the NBA. And I trust him late as much as I do Anthony Edwards. And the Thunder are the better defensive team. I like the Thunder in 7. And I think that this series is going to be nothing short of amazing. So give me the Thunder in 7, Pacers in 6, as I highlighted earlier in the show. And I think we're in for what would be an outstanding NBA Finals if we got Pacers and Thunder. All these national markets would love it. They'd be like, hey, like the 2 smallest markets in the NBA are playing in the finals. That's so lovely. We're so glad that the Knicks and the Lakers aren't playing for it. Oh, man. I love this, and let's just get in front of this now. You're going to hear this stat a ton over the next few days. Ross Campbell, actually, hold that thought. Ross Campbell weighing in on the birthday celebration thing. And I think you're right, Ross. 18, he said these are the significant birthdays as an adult, and they would be worth celebrating. 18, 21, both clearly make sense. 18, you are an adult. 21, you can drink and all that. 30, 40, 50, and so on. Every decade makes sense. Ross, I agree with that. So what I'm hearing is my buddy who's turning 24, 25, I shouldn't go. Thank you, Ross. I greatly appreciate that. Anyway, if you want to weigh in on, what birthdays as an adult actually matter, you head over to YouTube, Indie Sports Ticket, subscribe, and let me know. You can also tweet at me on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith. Back to the stat that you're going to hear so much that you're going to throw up every time that you hear it going forward. The NBA is about to have its 7th different NBA champion in the last 7 years. It's the first time in the history of the sport that this is going to happen. And that's crazy, first and foremost. Secondly, I just know that this stat is going to be thrown out a million times, and I don't really think that it's that big of a deal. Without getting too granular, the NBA changed the way that they do all their salary cap stuff, and it was designed to create more parity. And this is something that Adam Silver has been longing for, right? He wants parity in the NBA. He wants everyone, to feel like they have a chance every year. And I don't think that that's the best thing. I think that the NBA and really sports in general, they are really at their best when you have a dynasty. Like watching teams fight and scratch and claw to get to a point where they feel like they can they could compete with the Warriors in like the late 2010s. Like that was fun. It was. I thought it was fun knowing that we were going to get LeBron James and Kyrie Irving playing against those Warriors teams year in and year out. And I get how that can be repetitive and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know who doesn't not like watching LeBron James play in the finals. Who didn't like watching Steph Curry play in the finals? Seriously, I think that that's incredibly important. I think dynasties are very important in sports, and when you have parity, like I don't think that animosity builds quite as frequently. Whereas, like animosity built between the Bulls and the Pistons, in the 90s because they played each other every year. And when you have parity and you have different teams being good and different teams being bad year in and year out, I just don't think that you get that quite as much. But we'll see. When we come back at 11 o'clock, Jared Dubin of Last Night in Basketball.com, an excellent Substack that you should go read. He joins the show. He's always good. He's a Knicks fan. He's going to give you a lot of good stuff on the Knicks going into this Pacers series, and we'll talk a little bit of Thunder and Timberwolves as well when we come back here in about 5 minutes.
do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome in to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice start to your week. Joined now by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at lastnightinbasketball.com, also host of the Double Dribble podcast, which you can get wherever you listen to your podcast. Jared, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing fine, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Ready for the games tonight. Let's just jump right into it. Let's start with the series that starts tonight. Timberwolves and Thunder. I'm excited. You got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Anthony Edwards, two of the best shooting guards the two best shooting guards in the NBA facing off. Obviously, people are going to be paying attention to them. But who are a couple other noteworthy players to pay attention to in this series?
Man, there are so many. Neither one of those guys is going to be guarded by each other, despite the fact that they're both the lead ball handler on their teams. Jaden McDaniels, who is a fantastic wing defender for the Thunder, I would imagine, is going to see the first shot at guarding Shai, and probably the significant majority of the time on Shai. If it's not McDaniels, maybe it's Edwards, but maybe it's Shai's cousin, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who comes off the bench for the Wolves on the other side of the ball. Anthony Edwards is going to see a whole lot of Lou Dort. Get ready to hear into the name Lou Dort all the time. It's going to, be ringing in your ears. It's going to be very interesting to watch him because he is among the most physical defenders in the NBA. He has incredibly quick feet. He has great hands. He is so strong. He's built like a linebacker. And, once Edwards gets a break from him, it's going to be Alex Caruso, who is probably pound for pound the best defender in the NBA. When you consider his size, he's unbelievable. He just guarded Nikola Jokic in Game 7, despite the fact that he's 6'4" and like 200 pounds. And, he lived to tell his story. You're going to see a lot of Cason Wallace on Anthony Edwards as well. And that's before we get to, the other stars on the team with, Julius Randle, Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, Rudy Gobert. Like there are so many guys that are going to have a massive impact on the series.
When I watched the Timberwolves so far in these playoffs, is there a part of you that is still wondering how good they are because they just disposed of the Lakers so quickly? Steph Curry gets hurt in that round against the Warriors. Is there a part of you that's still kind of intrigued to see what we're going to see from Minnesota, or are you pretty confident in their ability to compete with the Thunder?
I mean, I'm confident that they're very good. I am interested to see how their offense looks against, this is a defense that was one of the best defenses of the last 25 years when you consider the offensive environment that they played in this year. They held opponents so far below the league average in terms of their scoring efficiency. Like they made Nikola Jokic look mortal for 4 or 5 of the 7 games in that series that they just had. That is something that does not happen essentially ever. And Minnesota's offense is not nearly as good as Denver. We've seen both Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle sort of pass the test in this postseason of, a lot of things being put on their plate as both scorers and playmakers. And they've been able to avoid mistakes and avoid turnovers. That is much more difficult against Oklahoma City than it is against any other team in the league and almost against any other team in recent memory. And how they fare on that test this time around, if this team is turning the ball over a lot, the series is over, frankly. If they're turning the ball over, a moderate amount of times, then they have a chance. And they can't get overwhelmed by the length and the athleticism and the way that they swarm around the ball once you put it on the floor.
Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at lastnightinbasketball.com, also a host of the Double Dribble podcast, which you can get wherever you listen to your podcasts. So you talk about this swarming Oklahoma City Thunder defense. And when I watch them play, if you hesitate for half a second, they just recover to players so incredibly fast. And it makes me very concerned about Julius Randle. And you've watched more of Randle than I have over these past few years. So I'm kind of curious your thoughts on this. I feel like when Julius Randle catches the ball, it takes him like a second or two to figure out what he's going to do. And like, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, he has been throughout his career a pretty deliberate player, and he's at his best when he's not doing that, when he's making the quick, shoot, pass, drive decision. That's true for almost all players. Are there going to be opportunities for him to, clear out a side and maybe take a defender, especially if he's being defended by someone smaller? Yes, but that's not like indulging that part of his offense is probably not going to be the best path.
That's how I feel about it. And so I'm really kind of curious, like, how do you think he does in this series? Because he's been so good in these first, 10 games for Minnesota in these playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is going to depend on how the Thunder actually decide to guard him. Like, he's going to see, I would imagine, a bunch of different matchups. Like, I sort of feel like he's going to see Isaiah Hartenstein to start the series so that the Thunder can have Chet Holmgren sort of roam away from Rudy Gobert and protect the paint as a sort of backside help. For some reason in the previous series, they started Chet on Jokic, and they abandoned that after one game because it didn't work, because their defense is much better when Hartenstein is on essentially the big guy or the big offensive threat among the big guys, and Holmgren can roam away. So I imagine he'll see a bunch of Hartenstein. He still will see, obviously, a pretty decent share of Chet Holmgren. He's going to see Jalen Williams. He's going to see Lou Dort and Alex Caruso. Like, they are going to throw a ton of different looks at him and try to force him into mistakes.
Yeah, I think if I was a Thunder, I think I'd start Jalen Williams on him. Just because I think he's a lot bigger than most people realize. I like his foot speed to stay in front of Randall a little bit more than Hartenstein, but at the same time, it's like, who are you going to put Hartenstein on and Holmgren if you start that way? So the matchups for Randall defensively, I think are really intriguing. And speaking of Jalen Williams, one of the biggest storylines with the Thunder all season have been like, how does Jalen Williams perform in the playoffs? He's been up and down. How do you think he's going to play in this series?
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a really good player. For the most part, I expect guys to sort of reach their level. Like, there are going to be times where you play, above your capabilities and below your capabilities. He had the two wildest extremes of that in Game 6 and Game 7 against the Nuggets. Like, is it going to be easy for him? No. Like, it's going to be tough. It's always tough in the playoffs. The Wolves have one of, the best defenses in the NBA. He's going to be challenged on the other end, whether that's guarding Randall, excuse me, sorry, or whether that's guarding Jaden McDaniels, or, he might spend some time on Edwards. He might spend some time on, Dante DiVincenzo or even Mike Conley. Like, he's going to be challenged on both ends of the court, but the guy is a really, really good player. The idea that he's going to, shrink or whatever it is that a lot of people have put out there, like, I just don't see that being the case. Like, will he have some games where he struggles to shoot or struggle to finish? Probably everybody does, especially in the context of a small sample. But he's also going to have some games where, he might be the most important player out there. Like in that Game 7, he was absolutely massive. Game 5, he was massive. It's going to be – it's not going to be one way or the other. It's, the ups and downs of a series happen to basically everyone.
I agree. I feel like I feel like he's been more good than bad. And like you said, when you have a small sample, like, you're going to have bad games. Like, it happens. Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at Last Night in Basketball.com, also hosts the Double Dribble podcast. Jared, I like the Thunder in 7. I think we're in for an awesome series. What is your prediction?
I've got the Thunder also in 6.
6. I like it. Now, tomorrow night, which I'm very excited for, I know you are as well, being a Knicks fan, and I really struggled with my prediction because I think these teams are so different, just in terms of pace and depth and the way that they run their offenses. What part of the series are you most kind of curious about?
I think it's just how the Pacers decide they want to match up on defense. During the regular season, they guarded the Knicks straight up with Miles Turner defending Karl-Anthony Towns, and it did not go well. The Knicks ran the Brunson Towns pick and roll in those games 42.5 times per 100 possessions. That is an absolutely massive number that would lead the league by 10 miles. They were only at 27.5 for the regular season at large. And in the playoffs, every team so far has guarded Towns with a wing, in part to neuter that pick and roll. And they're down to 17.6 per 100 possessions of those pick and rolls. The Pacers, do they want to put Turner on Towns because that allows them to hide Tyrese Halliburton on Josh Hart? Or do they want to put Turner on Hart so that they can guard Towns with Pascal Siakam? But what does that mean about who Halliburton's going to have to guard? Because last year in this series, they started Andrew Nembhard on Jalen Brunson, but Brunson cooked him so bad in the first 2 games of the series, 72 points on 44 shots, that they had to change that matchup to Aaron Nesmith. And if Nesmith has to guard Brunson, then that means Halliburton then has to guard either Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby, neither of which is ideal. And then Nembhard's got to guard the other one, and he's going to have a significant size mismatch. Sort of the balancing act of how the Pacers want to match up between what's the best way to match up with the Knicks is going to be really interesting to watch.
Totally agree. Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at Last Night in Basketball.com. I agree. I think how the Knicks match up with the Pacers as well is every bit as intriguing to me, just because my big question is, where do you hide Jalen Brunson? Because, the Pacers, they involve everyone. So what do you think the Knicks do with the Pacers defensively?
Yeah, I mean, Tom Thibodeau might get interesting with his scheme like he did against the Celtics, where they started switching ball screens at a rate that they never came close to the regular season. But he basically never gets creative with the matchups. Like, they're going to match up straight up. Towns is going to guard Turner. Anunoby is going to guard Siakam. Bridges is going to guard Halliburton. Hart is going to guard Nesmith. And Brunson is going to guard Nembhard. Like, that, I would be shocked if we didn't see them come out that way.
Okay, good to know. How do you – because I think that when people think about the Pacers, for some reason, because of how they run their offense, people think about the Pacers and their ability to shoot the three, which is valid because they're shooting, I think, like 41% in these playoffs. But my thing when I watch the Pacers is they score so many points in the paint. Mitchell Robinson was amazing in that series against Boston. How do you think Tibbs kind of splits the time with Mitchell Robinson on the floor versus off the floor?
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting too. The Knicks, so they played the 2 bigs in the Detroit series and the Boston series for basically the same number of minutes. In the Detroit series, Towns and Robinson were even, plus minus. They literally played to a draw, +0. In the Celtics series, they were +40 with those 2 guys on the court together. The Pacers have played against 2 big lineups in both of their series. They absolutely destroyed the Heat with Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware on the court, which, they destroyed the Heat in general. In the second round, they beat the Cavs narrowly. I think it was by 8 points in the minutes with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen on the floor. But that was after the Mobley-Allen duo had sort of destroyed the league the entire season. So they've seen this kind of thing before. What I think makes the Knicks lineup different is it's so big and so overwhelming physically that it's a different challenge. Like, despite the fact that the Pacers won those minutes against the Cavs did have a 36% offensive rebound rate in the time with the 2 bigs on the court. And the Knicks just absolutely obliterated the Celtics with offensive rebounds when those 2 guys were on the court. The Knicks are a really good offensive rebounding team, especially when Robinson is out there. And the Pacers are an okay rebounding team, but they were not very good giving up, second chance points this year. So there is a chance for the Knicks to sort of swing things in their direction when they have those 2 guys on the court.
That's interesting. And the fact that you call the Pacers an okay rebounding team feels like you're being really nice. Because that is, like, whenever I watch the Pacers, that's always one of my biggest concerns is how are they going to rebound? Because, like, I appreciate Miles Turner, I think, more than a lot of Pacer fans do, just what he gives them with everything that he does offensively, but, like, he doesn't rebound very well. Siakam's an okay rebounder. And so, like, I think that you're exactly right when you talk about, like, how do the Pacers rebound if and when the Knicks play with both of those players on the floor at the same time. And joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at lastnightbasketball.com and on the Double Dribble podcast. And the other thing that I think makes it interesting is like Mitchell Robinson is so like athletic. Like he moves so incredibly well. And, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley obviously do as well, but I thought that the Pacers did a pretty decent job of taking advantage of one of the two whenever they were both on the floor together. And with the Knicks, like I don't know how well they're going to be able to do that with Mitchell Robinson on the floor. How important is the bench? Obviously Robinson, but also like Deuce McBride as well. How important is the bench for the Knicks in this series?
Well, I think the bench kind of oversells it. It's just two guys.
Fair
Campaign
point.
might get some minutes here and there, especially at the start of the series. Like they played him, I'm pretty sure in each of the first 5 games against the Celtics. But in game five, he had only one stint in the first half before they got blown off the court. In game 6 against the Celtics, they only played Robinson and McBride off the bench. Mitch obviously brings something to the table that is kind of unreplicable. He has been, he's been one of the best big men in the playoffs, despite the fact he's playing 18, 20 minutes a night off the bench. He's just absolutely changing games in the time that he's on the floor. Deuce was, frankly horrendous in the first round series against the Pistons. He was not good at all. He couldn't make a shot. All of a sudden against the Celtics, he turned into the guy he wasn't for most of the playoffs last year. If he's making shots, that is so big for the Knicks, especially if the Pacers are going to ignore Hart and it starts affecting their offense. The obvious place to turn is to get Deuce out there for a little bit more shooting. Granted, Tom Thibodeau will do that as something beyond a last resort. Like taking Hart off the court is not even a last resort. It's like an end of the world resort for him. and Hart is so important for them anyway. Like he's all over the offensive glass. He's the guy that gets them out in transition. He's a chaos creator. The guy, his role is essentially to be everywhere, and he does it.
Yeah, I'm so just intrigued by this aspect of it. Because like you said, it's not a bench. It's two guys. And the Pacers play at such a breakneck pace. Like it feels so much faster than what they even played at during the regular season. How concerned are you about the Knicks and their conditioning and the lack of a bench and the fact that, this series is going to be every other day? Or is that something that's really just kind of overblown?
I'm not necessarily concerned about their conditioning. They have 3 guys who can just play 42, 44 minutes, and it seemingly doesn't affect them somehow. With Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby. Bridges, I know he talked about it earlier in the season about the minutes and how, he wants to play these guys a little less because it, helps them conserve energy. But when he actually plays massive minutes in a game, it doesn't look like it affects him. He played 51 minutes in the first game of the series against Boston, and he completely took over the overtime with his defense. Anunoby is similar. And then Hart, I don't think I've ever seen him get tired. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But what the Pacers are going to do is they're going to make every single minute difficult to get through. We saw it last year in the playoffs where they pressured the Knicks in the backcourt on 40 possessions per game in that series. Granted, the Knicks were running out of bodies, and Brunson was banged up in a way that he isn't this year, and Hart was banged up in a way that he isn't this year, and they have more guys capable of initiating the offense with Brunson and Deuce and Hart and also Bridges, who they didn't have last year, so they can find different ways to bring up the ball rather than having Brunson sort of pound the ball into the ground while Nembhard or Nesmith hounds him up the floor for 8 seconds, and then they get into their Brunson isolation stuff because there was no other way for them to create offense last year. They're a little bit more diverse than that this year. They don't always get to that diversity because they tend to err towards let's give it to Jalen. especially in crunch time, which honestly is the best strategy in crunch time. Like nobody has a better crunch time strategy than that, except probably the Nuggets with let's give it to Jokic. But they can't do that the entire game. It'll be too physically taxing for him, especially at his size and how physical the Pacers are with ball handlers. Not just with Nembhard and Neesmith, but with McConnell as well.
I'm glad that you brought up the physicality, because the Pacers, like usually when you look at teams that play really fast, I think most people assume that those teams aren't as physical, but the Pacers are they just beat you up.
Yeah. Kenny Atkinson talked about that last series. He was like, these guys are one of the most intense teams in the league, and they just get into you at all times.
And they have that luxury, I think, in part because of their depth. Like foul trouble obviously matters, but for them, it's not as big of a deal. And you talk about like how the Pacers are very physical with ball handlers. Who do you think is more upset after game one? Do you think Pacers fans will be more upset at the kind of flailing that Brunson can do? Or do you think Knicks fans will be more upset about how, like Aaron Neesmith fouls like every possession that on defense? Which fan base do you think is going to be a little more fired up after game one?
Whichever team loses.
That's the right answer. That is the right answer. But that is, I'm so intrigued to kind of see how that goes. And I'm also glad that you brought up Jalen Brunson and how great he's been in the fourth quarter of these games. Because like Tyrese Halliburton, like you could make, I think, a real argument that Brunson and Halliburton have been the two best fourth quarter guards throughout these playoffs. And how do you think? And I love just how differently they both do it. If these games are close, what is going to kind of be the thing that separates one team from the other? Is it just going to be, Halliburton made one more play than Brunson, or Brunson made one more play than Halliburton, or is it going to be something else?
It's going to be partially that. It's going to be, turnovers and offensive rebounds and stuff. Like, it's not going to be one thing. It's never one thing. It's everything, like, especially when you get down to close games in the fourth quarter. Like, was it Brunson a lot of times against the Celtics? Yeah. But it was also Mikal Bridges, and it was also the defense, and it was also offensive rebounding. And was it Tyrese Halliburton, roasting Jared Allen on a switch late in the game to get the game-winning jumper? Yeah. But it was also, Miles Turner and pick and pops, and Siakam ducking in when they were playing against the zone, and Aaron Neesmith hitting shots both off the catch and off the dribble. And it was Andrew Nembhard somehow making like 95% of his threes at a time. It's never just one thing. It's everything always.
Yeah, you're exactly right on that. Last thing for you, Jared, and I will let you go. I like the Pacers in 6. I feel terrible about it. I would say the Pacers in 7, but I just think the odds of winning a Game 7 in New York in back-to-back postseasons is very low. So I went with the Pacers in 6. Who do you like in this series?
Ask me again in 10 minutes, my answer might change. I started, like, before I did my research, just based on the way that the teams have been playing, I was on Pacers in 6 or 7, doing a little bit like my deep dive yesterday pushed me back towards the Knicks in 7, and I don't feel great about it either. Like, I don't feel like, when I say I think the Pacers are going to win, I'm like, like it feels like the Knicks might have more to go to. And then when I say the Knicks are going to win, I'm like, it feels like the Pacers can kind of throw them off their game a little bit. It's like, I don't feel good about any pick, and I'm really just going with Knicks in 7 because they have home court, and I know that the Pacers won Game 7 there last year. It's just, both teams are so different. Like, I can't decide. I'm going like,
yeah,
I don't feel good about anything, and I'm just sort of leaning on the Knicks have home court and the Knicks have Brunson, and that's sort of what pushes me there. But again, if you ask me in 10 minutes, I might go, I feel like the Pacers can throw them off their game a little bit, and that's what pushes me to Indiana.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it as well, which is good. Like, this is how we should feel about the conference finals on both sides, which hopefully indicates that this series is going to be awesome. Hopefully both teams stay healthy, because I think that if they do, it's going to be just an awesome series. I lied, Jared. This is the last thing that I'm going to ask you. So I need a word for this, but stats come out sometimes, and then everyone keeps saying the stat to a point where it becomes incredibly annoying. And I'm already very annoyed by for the first time in the history of the NBA, we're going to have 7 different champions in 7 seasons. And everything I've read, I think people like this and they think that it's a good thing. I'm not fully convinced. Like, I think dynasties are really good for sports. I think some of my favorite time watching basketball was those like mid 2010 Golden State Warrior teams, knowing that they're going to play against the Cavaliers. And we're going to have LeBron James in the finals against Steph Curry, and it's going to be awesome. How do you kind of feel about this new parity? Do you think it's good for the league? Do you think it's bad? How do you kind of feel about it?
I think that it might be premature. Like, we have a team that won 68 games with the best point differential of all time, and every player on their roster, except for Alex Caruso and Kenrich Williams, is 27 years old or younger. We might not be done with dynasties just yet.
That is a great point. That's yeah, no counter to that. But just in terms of the idea of like 7 different champions in the last 7 years, like, do you think that's a good thing, or do you kind of wish that there had been a dynasty in there somewhere?
I'm kind of agnostic on that. Like, it doesn't bother me when there are dominant teams in the way that it does a lot of people. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed the years where it was the Warriors and the Cavs in the finals for a few years in a row. Like, I did not mind that in the way that a lot of people did. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this last, 6 or 7 year span where it's been different teams in the finals every season. I get more invested in the quality of the games and in the quality of the play on the court than I do necessarily in which teams are getting there. Like, there was a sort of, not a blow up, but like a kerfuffle, I guess, a couple of years ago when it was the Nuggets and the Heat and the finals. Like, oh my God, the league must be so annoyed. Like, if you can't find ways to sell, Nikola Jokic against one of the best defenses in the league and the first eight seed to make the finals since 1999 with one of, the most unusual superstars in the league. Like, this is what I was saying at the time. Like, then you should get out of the selling business. There's the same thing, last year with the Celtics. Excuse me, the Celtics against Luka and Kyrie and that Mavericks defense in the second half of the season, and such a different team over the course of the year. And now, like, no matter what finals we get here, there is going to be something interesting to watch and to sell. And that should be what matters rather than, whether the specific teams are the same or different every year.
Very well said, Jared. Thank you for your time, as always. You had an article come out this morning, right, over at last night in basketball.com, right?
Yeah, I had the 3 things I'm watching in the Western Conference Finals, sort of previewing what we're going to see on the court in that one. And tomorrow I'll have 3 things I'm watching in the Eastern Conference Finals to preview that series.
Sounds good. I'm going to read them both because you do a great job writing and covering the league. Jared, thank you for your time, as always, man. See you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Jared Dubin, you can check him out on Twitter at JADubin5. Go check out his Substack last night in basketball. It is excellent. He's a very good writer, does a very good job of covering the league. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, we're going to talk Pacers, Knicks, why this year just feels different for our beloved Indiana Pacers.
fits in today's sports world. It's here. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Big thank you to Jared Dubin for, coming on the show for 27 minutes there. Jeez, he's always good. Big Knicks fan. I knew he'd have a great scoop on the Knicks and what this series is going to look like for them, for the Pacers. It all comes back to Tyrese Halliburton. He is the engine of this offense, and he's got to continue to be great because that's what he has been. In 9 of these 10 playoff games so far, Game 3 against Cleveland, he wasn't very good. 4 points, stood in the corner, pouted because Max Strus wouldn't let him get the ball very easily. Game 4 came back a lot better. Game 5, he was obviously great in that closeout game in Cleveland. And that's the guy that the Pacers need. They need hyper-aggressive, looking to attack switches, Tyrese Halliburton. Because, when he's himself, more importantly, when he is the aggressive version of himself, he, becomes one of, the 10 best players in the NBA because he's an excellent isolation player, okay? Gets to his step-back three really well. He shot the ball really well off the bounce this year. His mid-range pull-up jumper is nice. He's got a nice floater game. He finishes at the rim at a very high level. And, that guy who is just great attacking off the bounce. That is the version of Tyrese Halliburton that the Pacers need in this series. They also need for Miles Turner to continue to protect the rim at a high level. He's averaging 2.5 blocks a game. He is just making everything hard. And I think that when we think about guys that protect the rim, we think about, block shots, and that's obviously part of it. But what you really want is just someone who makes it tough. And that's what he does. He doesn't foul a ton either. He's only averaging, 2.5 fouls per game. And I can't wait to kind of see how he deals with Jalen Brunson coming downhill and getting to the rim, and OG Anunoby, and how does he deal with Karl Anthony Towns when he wants to post up, and all of those types of things are going to be important for the Pacers to get stops because the Knicks are a better offensive team this year than they were last year, just simply because they have more options. OG Anunoby is an improved offensive player. Cal Bridges is a very good offensive player. So is Karl Anthony Towns. And so it's more than just trying to bottle up Jalen Brunson. It's about everyone else on top of that. So Miles Turner protecting the rim, just being a deterrent is going to be so important for them to win this series. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, we'll get into the Pacers and what's different this year compared to last year. The conversation around them is different. The team is, for the most part, the same, but they're better. And it's awesome. We're also going to preview Pacers and Knicks, all that coming your way when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
It may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Fever play the Dream tonight here in Indy. So if you don't have anything going on, go watch the Fever play. I guess. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. Whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe watch it on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith, if you want to follow me and watch the show there. You can also tune in via the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. Now, this year feels different for the Indiana Pacers. You know, they got to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, but no one thought they could win. Let's just be honest. No one thought they had a chance against Boston. People were right. They ended up getting swept. And I know part of that's because Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. But let's be real. Like, they weren't as good as the Boston Celtics were last year. It's just the very simple reality of it. You know, the Celtics cruised through the playoffs and into the NBA Finals, where they ended up obviously beating the Dallas Mavericks in 5 games. And this year, it's just different. You know, even though they were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, I didn't talk about the Pacers maybe winning the NBA Finals, or I didn't even talk about them getting to the NBA Finals. I was like, yeah, Boston's better than they are. Sorry. This year, though, we're not only talking about the Pacers advancing beyond the Eastern Conference Finals. We're talking about them winning the NBA Finals, or I've talked about it, because they are that good. This team has gotten so much better from last year to this year. Like, every player on this Pacers roster has improved. You know, Tyrese Halliburton is a better defender. Andrew Nembhard, who was a very good defender last year, has gone up a level defensively. And I'm very intrigued to kind of see how he does tomorrow night defending Jalen Brunson. Obi Toppin is averaging a career high in points. Miles Turner shooting a career high from 3. Benedict Mathurin is shooting a career high from the field, and he's turned into a pretty decent defender. Jarris Walker has looked playable in some of these playoff series. You know, he's turned into a decent player. Like, that's why they're here. The player development of the Pacers has been outstanding. And I've talked a lot about how Chad Buchanan and, you know, Kevin Pritchard have done an excellent job of building this Pacers team and this Pacers roster. And that's obviously a very important thing. But you also have to have the proper coaching staff in place to develop players. And the Pacers have that. Rick Carlisle and the rest of this coaching staff have done an excellent job of helping guys get better once they've been traded for or drafted by this Pacers front office. And it's just been a lot of fun to see, as someone who enjoys watching young players get better, to see the steady improvement of this Pacers team has just been a lot of fun. And I think that this series between the Knicks and the Pacers, you know, very much encapsulates how big market and small market teams tend to build. You know, like the Knicks are in the Eastern Conference Finals because they made not one, but 2 big trades, going out and acquiring Karl Anthony Towns and making a big-time trade for Mikal Bridges. The Pacers are in the Eastern Conference Finals because they just continued to develop the players that they both drafted and traded for. Because that's how big markets build their teams, right? They build their teams through big trades and big free agent signings. Small market teams build their teams through the development of players that they traded and drafted. The Thunder have drafted and developed players better than anyone else in the NBA, and it's why they are now favorites to win the NBA Finals and potentially be a dynasty, as Jared Dubin talked about here on the show about 20 minutes ago. The Thunder have developed players, and now they're the favorites to win the NBA Finals. The Pacers have, you know, a shot at playing in and winning the NBA Finals because of their ability to develop players. Okay, the Knicks, they're in this position because they traded for Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns. Then you've got, you know, the Lakers out in the West, who are now very relevant because they made a big trade and they landed Luka Doncic. But before that, they were relevant because they convinced LeBron James to sign with them. And I cannot wait for both of these series. Minnesota, by the way, they're in this position because of the way that they've drafted and developed players. Jaden McDaniels has turned into a very good player. Anthony Edwards has turned into a very good player. We can just keep running through it. And I very much appreciate that about these teams that are left. Now, Pacers, Knicks is the rematch from the NBA playoffs last year. Pacers obviously won that series in 7 games. And, Pacers won Game 7 in Madison Square Garden. The Pacers set the record for the highest field goal percentage in a playoff game in NBA history. It was awesome. I'll never forget watching that game. And I don't want to hear anything about the Pacers not being able to handle the bright lights of MSG when they won a Game 7 there last year. Now, that's what people should remember about the series, but they don't. They want to bring up the injuries and all that kind of stuff. Well, the Pacers were banged up too, but none of that really matters because both of these teams are different from last year. Pacers are just better. The Knicks changed a lot of their personnel. The Knicks are healthy coming into the series. Julius Randle's gone, Dante DiVincenzo's gone, and Isaiah Hartenstein is gone. Right? The Knicks decided to replace those guys with Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges. For the Pacers, Benedict Mathurin's back, and they've improved since last year. After the All-Star break last year, people talked about how the Pacers had improved defensively. They were 18th in defensive rating in the NBA last year after the All-Star break. This year, in a much larger sample size, the final 57 games of their season, they were 6th. They were the 6th best defense in the NBA. This is a significantly better defensive team than what the Knicks played last year. Andrew Nembhard is now one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. Aaron Nesmith, still a great defender. TJ McConnell off the bench can still guard. Miles Turner is a reliable rim protector. Tyrese Halliburton has been much better in these playoffs on the defensive side of the ball. Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker have both turned into solid defensive players off the bench. In the playoffs, the Pacers' defensive rating is 111.9. Last year it was 118.8. Okay, and they didn't play a team anywhere near as good offensively as the Cleveland Cavaliers this year in the playoffs last year. Of the teams remaining, the Pacers have the highest offensive rating of the teams in the conference finals. Okay, they are a much more complete team this year than they were last year, and they're going to give the Knicks all they can handle. The line on this is pretty slim. The Pacers are underdogs to win the series. They're plus 122. Okay, and I'll be interested to see how they go about guarding the Knicks. I think they're going to start with Nembhard on Brunson. The issue is Brunson had his way with Nembhard last year. Aaron Nesmith and TJ McConnell were much better defensively on Jalen Brunson last year, but I do think that Andrew Nembhard has improved as a defender since then. So I think they're going to start with Nembhard on Brunson. The issue is I don't think that Andrew Nembhard is the kind of defender that Jalen Brunson is very well against. Okay. So we'll see how that goes. And if they do have to move Nembhard off Brunson, then that opens up a lot of other issues. Because Aaron Nesmith is on Brunson, which means Brunson now has to guard either Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby. And it causes problems. So hopefully Andrew Nembhard can get it done defensively on Jalen Brunson this year. For the Knicks, they're better on both sides of the ball as well. When you add Mikal Bridges to a team that defended really well last year, then you're going to be better defensively. Their defensive rating is up from the playoffs last year. Last year it was 120.6. Pacers really did a number on them. And this year it's only 110.6. And offensively, if you look at the numbers will tell you that they're worse on offense, but I don't think that's true. I think part of it is they haven't played a defense in these playoffs as bad as the Pacers defense was last year. And most importantly, they just have more options. When you add Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges, it just makes your offense easier because both of those guys can put it on the deck and go score, and they can put it on the deck and they can create for everybody else. And that is so incredibly important. Whereas last year, it was just all Jalen Brunson. It was like, you know what? We're going to give Jalen Brunson the ball, and we're going to let him, be Jalen Brunson. And we're going to hope that works out for us in some way, shape, or form. So we'll see kind of how they go about attacking this Pacers defense that is much better. I think that, for the Knicks, it's pretty simple to know what they're going to do on defense. They'll put Towns on Turner, Anunoby on Siakam, Mikal Bridges on Tyrese Halliburton, Josh Hart on Aaron Nesmith, and then they'll put Jalen Brunson on Andrew Nembhard, which is, that's going to be tough for Brunson. People are going to talk about, like, how is Tyrese Halliburton going to play defense? Well, how is Jalen Brunson going to play defense? He's going to be the smallest dude on the floor by a lot. Andrew Nembhard has had a very good offensive playoffs so far, and that is a matchup that he can definitely win. So I'm very intrigued to kind of see how that goes. The pace of this series is obviously going to be important. The Pacers play incredibly fast. The Knicks play incredibly slow. I think whoever dictates pace the best is going to have an excellent chance to win this series. And it's really, the most important thing to me, because the Pacers are at their best when they're playing fast, when it's up and down, when they can score and then pressure you and speed you up. And the Knicks are at their best when the game is slow and they get to set their defense, because when you have Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson on the floor, you're not going to be great on defense. You're just not. And when you're playing against this Pacers team where you can't really hide anyone, because the Pacers have 5 guys on the floor at all times who can dribble, pass, and shoot, good luck hiding Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. So very intrigued to kind of see how the Knicks deal with that. I do think we're going to see a pretty steady dose of Mitchell Robinson playing in this series, just because the Pacers score in the lane as well as anyone else in the NBA. And Karl-Anthony Towns, not exactly a great rim protector. He rebounds well, but he does not protect the rim. And that is another area of concern. How do the Pacers rebound? It was important for them against Cleveland. Every game where they were close in the rebounding battle, they won. If they were close or they won the rebounding battle, they won the game. Like, that was just the very simple reality with the Pacers in that series against Cleveland. And I think the same thing's going to be true here, because the Knicks are more than capable of just beating the Pacers up on the glass, because they're a bigger team. Like, between Bridges, Anunoby, Towns, like, if that's your front line, like, you're huge. And then Josh Hart is like the best 6'4" rebounder in the NBA. So the Pacers have got to box out. They have to rebound. If they lose this series, that's going to play a major role in it. I like the Pacers in 6. I don't feel great about it, but we'll see. I do like them tomorrow night. I'll tell you why on the show tomorrow, because I think I'm pretty smart, and I think my reasoning for it is pretty smart as well. So that's going to do it here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to tune in, whether that was on YouTube, Indie Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe you watch the show on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith, if you want to follow me there. Very much appreciate it. Maybe you listen via the Indie Sports Ticket app, but you can download wherever you find your apps. The Dan Dockett Show is set to come up next. Frank Isola from New York. He's going to join the show at 12:30. Dan was supposed to grab someone to talk about the Indy 500 as well. No idea when that guy's coming on, but it'll be good. Can't wait. Thank you again for tuning into the Real Jonathan Smith Show. I'll be back again tomorrow from 10 to noon, getting you ready for Knicks Pacers game 1. We got Thunder Timberwolves tonight as well. And Caitlin Clark plays tonight, so I'm sure we'll have some sort of WNBA drama to discuss tomorrow. 10 to noon, the Real Jonathan Smith Show. I'll talk to you then.